Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Presented by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of the Bible from leading experts in the field of archaeology.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. David Graves, an experienced biblical archaeologist and CEO of Electronic Christian Media. I'm here today with another exciting episode on our Archaeology Discoveries channel, where we discuss important archaeological artifacts related to the Bible. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel.
Well, welcome. This is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. I'm your host, George Sparks. And my special guest is Dr. David Graves. And Dr. David Graves received his PhD from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, and has been involved in teaching the Bible and archaeology for more than 35 years. He has taught at Oxford University, England, Liberty University School of Divinity, provided tours of the Ashmolean and the British museums, traveled extensively throughout the Middle East, has been involved in the Mount Ararat research. He has excavated at Qumran, the Temple Mount, and Shiloh in Israel, as well as Tel El Hammam in Jordan. For over 10 seasons, he has been involved in excavating the Dead Sea Scroll caves and has authored many books as well as publications. Welcome to the program, Dr. David Graves. And today you got a PowerPoint to present, and we're going to look at the Arch of Titus. And this has to do with the Romans' domination over the first Jewish revolt, right? And this is what's on the ark, which was behind me right here. We got a few artifacts to share, and so this is going to be a really cool program. So people, you want to stay tuned and watch this. So Dr. Graves, we're ready if you need to put up your PowerPoint.
Oh, great. Good to be with you, George. We'll take a look at the Arch of Titus. Host disabled participating screen sharing.
Well, I'm being a real knucklehead today, it looks like. Let me see what's going on here.
We usually have that preset, but here we go. Great. Okay. So we're going to talk about the Arch of Titus today and the Temple Menorah. Material from my book on the New Testament, Archaeology of the New Testament. That's what it looks like when I was there in 2012. I had a beautiful day, and we didn't have a lot of tourists mulling around. I think it was because it was so hot that day. It was pretty warm, but I got a good shot of it. There's the books, the Archaeology of the New Testament. So I have a full description there with all the footnotes and all the receipts that you can investigate for more details. Well, the Arch of Titus is in the Forum in Rome. This is the image of it here. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It's located at the highest point on the Via Sacra. So that's the road that runs right through here. This is what it looked like in 1821. It was restored during the pontificate of Pope Pius VII by Giuseppe Valladier in 1821. So it's been there for a very long time. They've done some restoration on it, which is a good thing. It has the depiction of the menorah, the table of the presence, and the two silver trumpets as they appeared in the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. What prompted me to talk about this today was I was on Facebook. I have a Facebook group that I belong to, and somebody on that post had posted a photograph from the inside here, this side of the inside panel of the Arch of Titus, but they stated that it was the Arch of Constantine, which is this arch that has actually three arches, and it's further up the hill here on the Forum in Rome. initially, and there's my photograph of the Arch of Constantine. You can't get to it today because it's got a fence all around it. So he wasn't able to stand in there and take that that photograph there of the inside of the arch. Now, what threw me off was I knew that there was a relief on the inside of this arch, but the roof has a beautiful mosaic on the top of it, of the arch, that the Arch of Constantine doesn't have. So I thought, something's wrong here. And I said, have I made a mistake? Thinking that this is the Arch of Titus and was Arch of Constantine or something. So I went back to my books, and this is actually what the Arch of Titus looks like from the inside. As you stand in the between the arches and you look up. So you've got a panel on this side. And this photograph here is taken from the other side of this arch as you're walking this way through the arch. So we have the menorah, mosaic, not mosaic, but relief here on the right. And then we have a relief here on the left with the horses. And this is the one that was posted on Facebook stating it was the Arch of Constantine. I said, that can't be, because I remember how this the top of the arch looked. So they put a whole bunch of information about the Arch of Constantine, but showed the wrong picture. So if you really want to know what's going on, stay tuned to our channel, and you'll get educated and learn a lot, and help you with the misinformation that's being foisted upon you on the internet. This is the photograph that was posted on Facebook. You can clearly see here the relief of the horses, the chariot, and the emperor, and then you have this beautiful rosette relief at the top. Here I am standing in front of it in 2012. It's the honorific Arch of Titus, constructed by Titus' younger brother Domitian in AD 81 in commemoration of Titus's victories in Jerusalem. So it was built by his brother Domitian, but it was in honor of his brother Titus. So the story goes, of course, everybody knows that in 70 AD, the Romans come through Jerusalem. They conquer Jerusalem. They take and destroy the temple, and they cart off all of the artifacts, all of the temple back to Rome. Well, actually, we'll look at that in a little more detail. There's a bit of a journey that they take. It's the oldest surviving example also of a Roman arch. Folks probably didn't realize that this one here is the oldest. The Arch of Constantine dates to about 320 something, I think 321 AD. I have to go back and look at the exact date, but it's a couple.
It'd have to be Byzantine.
Yeah, it's a couple of centuries later than when this one was actually built. It's not as elaborate, not as beautiful. So inside of the Arch of Titus, depicted here, the two impressive panels with reliefs are on either side of the arch. It depicts Titus riding in a chariot accompanied by the goddess Victoria and the goddess Roma, the goddess of Rome. There's a marble bust here of Domitian that was taken in the Louvre. So the first, as I mentioned, depicts the riding on Titus in a chariot. The second one is the Romans' procession carrying the spoiled plunder from the Second Temple in Jerusalem, conquered in 70 AD. So here's a close-up of it. Folks can notice it behind George there. He's got a nice clear image of it behind. Here we have a reproduction that was made from the photograph that's now in front of the government buildings in Israel. And it's quite large. I think it's It's something like 6 feet tall. So they've blown it up. So it's a depiction of the menorah as portrayed as it was in the temple in the 1st century. So we get an idea they didn't have cameras and photographs back then. But here we have craftsmen and artisans giving us a picture in relief of what the menorah looked like that stood in the temple. As the Romans are carrying it off, you can see the poles. They're carrying it on some kind of a stand. Here's the poles right here. Here we have the standards, Roman standards here and here. And then here we have the 2 silver trumpets and the table of showbread. So this is the side where this particular relief is located. There's the menorah, again, a close-up of it. And there's the table of showbread right here that they're carrying. See it here. And now Yarden argues that the depiction of the menorah stands is the actual Jewish carrying frame as derives, serving both a permanent furculum and pedestal. However, Kleiner and Franner are skeptical of that view, and they prefer to think of it as a specially constructed Roman carrying pedestal or platform the Romans constructed to carry the artifacts off, due to the decorations of an eagle and sea creatures that are typically Roman. However, I would argue you need to also remember that the altar in the synagogue in Sardis also depicts an eagle and 2 lions on either side of the altar in the synagogue. So just because we find those particular images doesn't necessarily mean that they were done by the Romans. The Jews also assimilated those ideas, Roman ideas, into their own iconology. It's called syncretism. Also displayed in relief are the 2 silver trumpets, as I mentioned, and the table of the presence. It's interesting that the names have been given to the 2 silver trumpets by the Israelites. They called one Israel and the other one Jericho. So these objects were originally gilded with gold with a blue background. Here's another photograph of it. It's a little clearer, more high resolution. It's hard to get a good photo of it because it's inside the arch and the light is not always that good. So this one's a really well done photograph where you can clearly see the table of the presence there and all the different elements of the Romans carrying off the artifacts. Now here's a reconstruction, digital reconstruction, showing the Arch of Titus, the menorah panel, as it would have originally been depicted in color. And we know it was in color because we found the pigments. They found the pigments still on the inside of it. So I guess people don't realize that a lot of these were actually colored in antiquity. So that's something that we now know. They were painted and colored. So that gives you a pretty good idea of what it looked like. There's the menorah, table of the presence, and then the silver trumpets. And there was a Latin inscription in brass, which read, or bronze, which read, "The Roman Senate and people to deified Titus, Vespasian, Augustus, son of deified Vespasian." And that's what it looks like, a close-up of it there. And so in 129 Emperor Hadrian rebuilt Jerusalem as Aelia Capitolia, or Capitolina, had its own temple to a god, the Roman god Jupiter Capitolinus, built on the site of the remains of the Jewish temple. The Romans built their temple on top of the Jewish temple on the Temple Mount, and dedicated to the Roman god. And then the Romans attacked Qumran on the way to Masada. The Qumran's where the Dead Sea Scrolls were located in the caves around that. And then, of course, we know the story of the 2-year conquest of the top of the fortification of Masada, Herod's fortification there. There's a bust of Hadrian. The Essenes, as I said, hid the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves and the cliffs before they had arrived. The revolt ended with the fall of Masada fortress in AD 73. So that's when this fortress here fell to the Romans after 2 years. The treasures of the Jews, according to Procopius, with Titus, the son of Vespasian, together with certain others, were brought to Rome after the capture of Jerusalem. There's the text, if you want to look it up, in the Procopius's Vandal Wars. And this is the Temple of Peace, where those artifacts were brought to Jerusalem, or to Rome, after they were captured in Jerusalem. The Vespasian put them on display there in the Temple of Peace. In AD 455, Generic, the king of the Vandals, he took the temple vessels in the sack of Rome. So they lose them. And then in AD 534, Belisarius brought the temple items to Constantinople, then called Byzantium, from Carthage, according to Procopius. And when Justinian became aware of the items, he sent everything to the sanctuaries of the Christians in Jerusalem. So they come back to Jerusalem, according to Procopius. So he gives the account of the travels of the artifacts. I'll go back. One thing to notice here is that there isn't any representation of the Ark of the Covenant. So I think that's notable. If the Ark of the Covenant was still in Jerusalem and carried back to Rome, then there would have been a depiction of it, I'm sure, on one of these reliefs. But what's interesting from archaeology is that after 70 AD, there's a rise in gold coinage. So some people have speculated that the Ark of the Covenant was disassembled and melted down to make gold coins to pay for the armies. And these are all that's left in Jerusalem when the Romans showed up to carry back to Rome. Again, that's hypothesis. We're not certain, but it seems to give some archaeological correlating evidence that perhaps they dismantled, boiled down, melted the gold, and made coins out of it, carted everything else back to Rome. So that's a little of an overview of the Arch of Titus. I think it's really, really significant because we get to see what the menorah looked like that was sitting in the temple in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. And that's pretty cool, if you ask me. Some questions, George?
Well, it is pretty interesting because being represented as what is taken out of Jerusalem, and that'd be after the fall of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., except the fall of Masada, like you already stated, was 73. So
Yeah.
the revolt didn't really come to an end until around 73.
That's right.
And then the Arch of Titus was built by his brother in 81. So you could say maybe another 8 years later after Masada, somewhere there. Eight? No, maybe
It was
not
in
even that.
commemoration for what his
Yeah.
brother had done. And we know that Titus was the one in charge of the um, conquest of Masada. So we know he was active in that time period. So it all fits together. So
And then you're not very romantic about the Ark of the Covenant. Aren't you supposed to tell us that it's buried somewhere underneath the temple, or maybe a cave around Jerusalem, or somewhere down by the Dead Sea? And don't tell us that somebody melted it down to make coins. Oh my gosh, man, that's just devastating.
oh, I know, terrible, terrible.
Or you said it's probably melted down before that, or
No, I think it was melted down at the time of the when they took the temple. Of course, they had access to it. That's assuming, of course, that it was still there in the temple in Jerusalem at that time. And there's
yeah.
speculation as to whether it survived, whether it was rebuilt. That's a whole other debate.
It is, but people are always gonna. That's always a fun discussion. Whether what do you want to do with the ark? Some people, in what do you want to call it, the second coming, have to have the ark back in the temple, and the temple's got to be built again. And of course, that's off the subject. But when you're in this kind of arena with the menorah and the silver trumpets, now let me ask you this: is that menorah the same menorah that they used in the tabernacle during the time period of Shiloh?
Not. It probably looked different. The one that we have in the tabernacle, that one appears to have had a different kind of base to it, more of a triangular base and more of a candelabra.
Okay, I'm not trying to stump you. I'm just wondering because I honestly don't know, because I think people would assume that one was the one that was made in the wilderness during, what do you want to say, Iron Age 1, Late Bronze Age, Moses and Joshua, then the tabernacle, and then of course you got a number of sieges. You talked about the pharaohs mentioned in the Bible, pharaohs such as Shishak, and then you got the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Persians.
Well, what we need to remember is that we're talking here about the Second Temple period. Mm-hmm. When you go back to the First Temple period of Solomon, there was actually a number of menorah that were in Solomon's temple, and they were created differently from the one that we have described in the wilderness with the tabernacle.
So that would make sense. They were
recreated. Whether this one was one of them from Solomon's temple, it's unlikely. They would have rebuilt it. So,
yeah, 1 second and all. Here. Because if we're looking at the time of Moses or Joshua, people are going to, I believe, like a culture is going to make items from that time period. Yeah. I mean, we're not going to find ruins of a 74 a plane in Gettysburg. That wouldn't make sense in archaeology. So we're usually going to find certain types of technologies and also styles of pottery. So this is just the point. And this is why I got in the showcase, because this is an Iron Age lamp. And this would be a similar type, not exact, but a similar type of lamp that would be used during the time period of Moses and the conquest under Joshua.
Right.
Would you agree with that? Kind
Yeah.
of. It is a different, but basic shape. It's so I would imagine that if this is the case, and this is what they're used to looking at, and this is the lamp, then if you had a menorah, you probably had something like this mounted, maybe at different levels, and
Yeah.
maybe tilted. And so in my mind, now when we get to the Roman period, because of course lamps change.
Yeah.
And I'll use this one for a representation, if you don't mind. And hopefully people can see this. Is it okay? Does it
Yeah.
get blurry?
No, in front of you, it's good.
Okay, so you can see the candelabrum here.
Yeah.
In a way, it looks very similar in some respects to the one that's on the Arch of Titus.
Yeah.
And I think what we're looking at on the top look more like lamps like this.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about here, I've seen debates about the base. And I think you mentioned that. Is that base from the Second Temple period, or was that designed by the Romans so they could have it in the procession, more decorated, or whatever their case might be? All right. But in antiquities, we discussed this before we got going. I don't try to sneak stuff in. But antiquities, I don't know if you can see this right here, but you mentioned the menorahs during the time period earlier had that base on it. It was like on a stand, like a tripod stand. And here it is right here. You can see, well, if you can't see it, what I'll do is I'll add a picture when we edit so you can see a close up. And of course, it's worn, but you can see the tripod stand right here.
Yeah. Now, George, another thing that I didn't put a photo up, I probably should have, is that in the first century, there was a bird house discovered in Jerusalem where on the wall in the plaster, there was the etching of a menorah, and it has like a tripod style base on it. So whether the person whose house that was in, some argue that it was the house of the priest because it was very close to the Temple Mount, whether he knew what the menorah looked like with a triangular base, and as you have stated, and some have argued that was a sort of a Roman platform that was created to carry the menorah, and that's still debated. There's a number of depictions of the menorah that give us an idea of what it looked like. So the top part, at least we know, likely represents what was in Jerusalem in the temple in the second period.
People think we don't got a lot to do, man. We argue about the base. We debate, well, what about the base? Got anything better to do? I don't know about that base. But anyway, in antiquities, if somebody was to purchase an antiquity, now I don't recommend this at all because a menorah lamp would cost something like this. Probably, I would imagine if this hit the antiquity market, it would probably go for at least 4,500, depending on the market, or more, 4,500 or more. All right. Yeah. So the thing is, it has to be a menorah, and in the Jewish tradition, the menorah will have to have the base. If it doesn't have the base in the design, as you see it displayed in an antiquity, it's just a candelabrum. It's not a menorah. I see this during the Byzantine period where they have, it looks like some would say it was a menorah, but technically it's just a candelabrum because it doesn't show the base. Now, why is this important in antiquities? Well, if you just have the candelabrum, right, and it's not the true menorah, it's not worth near as much. It could probably go for hundreds more than thousands. And now, another thing that is so rare that you talked about and so unique is that really, before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, it was not ethical to make pictures or drawings or sketches of the utensils that were used in the temple because they were sacred, according to their traditions.
Sure.
So for it to be in a priestly house, is extremely unique, especially a house that was destroyed during the first Jewish revolt, which would be before the first century. So ideally, then that was on the wall before the Roman siege. And it's also in a Jewish house. And it's on the it's in the west side, I believe, where we also have the wall. It's called the Wall Museum. I think it's WHOL. And now we have also in this museum, it's very, very close to the Burnt House Museum. Very, very close. You have what scholars, even Dr. Rittenmeyer, believes it was probably the house of the high priest, maybe Annas, his relatives, Caiaphas.
Right.
And it's if you go to Jerusalem, it's a must see. And if you're not aware of it, because you're thinking about the burnt house, so nobody really talks about as Christians. What do we mean the burnt house? But it's absolutely fantastic to see, because I don't think the burnt house was not restored, but the house of Caiaphas, I'm just calling it house of Caiaphas, but the house of the high priest. It's basically a mansion at that time period. Of what they could, they restored it. I think Dr. Rittenmeyer also assisted in the restoration. And he made some claims. Once again, we'll use the word hypothesis. I don't want to be off the subject, but since we're talking about the candelabrum, the menorah, the temple, the first Jewish revolt, the burnt house, is that in the restoration of these ruins of these first century houses,
and we
of the high
also
priest.
we already talked about the process of conservation with Dr. Lane Rittenmeyer when I worked together with him at Shiloh.
That's correct. Yes,
he's an expert in conservation and has worked in Jerusalem on many sites and contributed, as you say, to the preservation of the high priest or the priest's house.
Right. Now, I don't mean to be, if I'm looking down, that's because your picture's down here in my screen. So it doesn't look like I'm, hopefully I don't look like I'm going, like I'm falling asleep or something. I got to remember, you got to look at the little light right here. So it looks like but actually our pictures are, and then I got a big screen right here. So the picture can be up here. So I could be up here looking but anyway, so if people are wondering, what is that guy doing? That's what's happening. And plus I got my notes over here. Back to the house. Go ahead.
Oh, I just think what's also really interesting about this relief is the two trumpets that we see, because not often do people talk about the trumpets that are blown, the silver trumpets that are pictured here in front of the table of showbread. So I think that's kind of interesting.
It is. I didn't know they had names. Israel and Jericho.
Yeah, they've named them. So some of the sources indicate
I thought
that
they call them, like, after the columns, like Yakim and Boaz, like the columns in front of the temple.
Solomon's temple, yeah. Well, see, they name everything because they same as Solomon's temple. They did the same here with the two trumpets.
Okay. So, this, by the way, this lamp here, this would be around 4th century. So once again, it was made after the temple destruction to remind the people of the artifacts, the utensils used in the temple. That's what this was, as a remembrance.
Yeah.
But once again, it's going to be, basically, it was made during the Byzantine period.
Yeah. And I didn't pull up some of my oil lamps, but there's actually some of them that have the way they're designed. You can see that one of the it looks like 3 V's, but the top one is the top lamp on the candlestick, and it's actually the wick. It's the nozzle of the oil lamp itself that you light. So it actually shows that one of those lamps in the division they're called candlestick candlestick lamps, but it's a different design, and they're Byzantine as well. So the menorah is very important in iconology in the Byzantine period, right from the 1st century all the way through. So
now that is also brings up a point about there was a debate among scholars, critical scholars, in the New Testament studies that Jesus would teach in the synagogues. And there were those that believed the first century there were, I guess at one time they believed that there were no synagogues. Some critical scholars,
Yeah.
not all, I said some, believed that synagogues were not built until much later. So if it mentioned the word synagogue, that Jesus would go to the synagogue, it would be more like an acronym in the text. But now we know that's not necessarily the case. However, when synagogues are built after the Jewish revolt, after 70, we start to see menorahs also being displayed in the synagogues.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be now this one, I believe, now it was not found in situ, all right? And it's a museum piece. It's extremely rare. This one's extremely rare, and it's been displayed. And we talked about a number of different synagogues, and one locally for maybe like 5 years, and then it was sent back to the museum. I just happened to have it. I thought at least I want to, and this is heavy. This is really heavy. So I'm going to try to attempt to show this to everybody.
You're going to turn off your background?
I don't know if I can drop it like this. Can I? Let me see if I can.
If not, you just lean back. I think you'll be okay.
Wait a second. No, I'll get it. I'll get it. What you're trying to say? I'm not that tech savvy, but there we go. See how that is? And also, when we look at synagogues, usually synagogues are made out of the local stone. So if it's in Galilee or the Golan Heights, it's going to be usually basalt.
Right.
Now, if somebody's got money, then you might have limestone or a combination of two. You go to, is it a Capernaum? Capernaum, you have the foundation of the first century synagogue, possibly the one that Jesus taught at.
That's
and
basalt.
It was basalt. And then you have the 4th, 5th century synagogue on top of that original base, right? So the base is basalt, but the 4th century synagogue is limestone, right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But if we want an earlier synagogue, I would say earlier synagogue, one that is built somewhere around the Golan Heights area. Why? Because the stone is basalt. And basalt is basically volcanic lava.
Yeah, when you
It's
travel
not a
up
very
north,
pretty. It's not a very pretty stone, and it's extremely heavy. And remember, this is early in the morning, and I'm 65. So, do you got your phone just in case you got to dial 911?
yeah, I'm ready to go here.
This thing is heavy. Let me see if I can angle this down a little bit so people can see this.
Oh, there you go.
So here's a rare opportunity. Now look, this is the menorah from a synagogue. So this is probably 4th century. So 1600 years old. And it's cut away. See, it's been cut away.
Yeah.
It was probably either the capital from a column or the base of a column. And the column would sit on top. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. All right. And now look at, this is what we're talking about right here. It has to have the base. And this is actually from a synagogue, an ancient synagogue. So everybody, if you couldn't see the lamp, this one, a very rare opportunity to actually see a menorah from a synagogue.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's time to go. Thanks, everybody, for your time. I appreciate it. Doctor, thank you very much. Everybody have a great day.